Global North versus Global South. Developed versus underdeveloped nations. We hear them all the time. But what do they actually mean? It seems obvious that some countries are winning in this capitalistic game, while others are left behind. An easy answer is to claim that some countries are better than others. But as we will learn in this video, that is not the case at all. The theory of Marxism in international relations and its evolution into neo-Marxism offer critical insights into understanding class relations, global inequality, and international political economy. Marxism is a structural theory just like realism, but unlike realism, its main focus is the economic and material aspects of international relations. In its structural analysis, Marxism focuses on class relations in capitalism rather than state relations like traditional IR theories. The source of structural effects is not anarchy, but the capitalist mode of production, which creates unjust political institutions and state relations. The power hierarchies among states are not static and defining, as in realism, but a symptom of historical processes of economic exploitation, imperialism, colonialism, and dependency. But before we can dive deep into the modern class relations between countries, we will have to go back to the 19th century, a time when Marxism theory was starting out. So let's begin. Marxism was founded by the German philosopher and economist Karl Marx, together with his collaborator Friedrich Engels, during the rapid industrialization of the 19th century. Central to the idea of Marxism is the thought of historical materialism. This idea states that history, institutions, and societies are based on the economic or material forces of production called the mode of production, and the redistribution of the resources between the haves and have-nots. For Marx, what holds society together, or can change it drastically, is the mode of production. As modes of production evolve with technology, they create contradictions, where the new system is in conflict with the previous, which can only be resolved by adaptation or a social revolution. In Marxist theory, society consists of two parts, the base and the superstructure. The base refers to the mode of production and is the foundation of society, the economy, technology, and production. The superstructure rests on top of the base and refers to culture, institutions, roles, rituals, religion, media, and the state. The two structures are influencing one another, but according to Marx, the base determines superstructure, with the goal of keeping the mode of production in place. To understand the way wealth was distributed and consumed for Marx, it is necessary to understand the conditions under which it was produced. The modes of production that Marx identified were primitive communism, slave society, feudalism, capitalism, and communism. In each of these stages, the surplus from the mode of production was distributed differently, which creates tension between the classes, or class conflict. According to Marx, class conflict has always been present, and there is no difference in this new capitalist system of economic production. The feudal system gave way to capitalism, which created two classes of people, the bourgeoisie, or the owners of the means of production, and the proletariat, or the workers. Two opposing classes, with the bourgeoisie having advantage in this new system. Here's how it works. Capitalists make profits not by creating value themselves, but by paying workers less than the value they actually produce. For Marx, this profit is essentially theft, an extraction of surplus value from the labor of the working class. This is the essence of exploitation in capitalism. For Marx, this system of exploitation can only be resolved when the workers from all of the world will unite and seize the means of production through a social revolution, establishing common ownership and a new communist system without exploitation. He predicted that the Western capitalist economies will be shaken by worker revolutions rising up against their capitalist masters. But Marx was clear to point out that capitalism was the best system of producing goods, and its capabilities of overproducing and satisfying all humanity's needs will eventually lead to communism, eliminating the need for a high number of workers and leading to greater freedom. Ironically, the worker revolutions did not happen in the West, but in the still agrarian and underdeveloped Russia. The Bolsheviks rose to power, led by Vladimir Lenin. Lenin, besides being a revolutionary, was also a Marxist theoretician. For Lenin, imperialism is the highest form of capitalism, where the imperialist countries were expanding their empires in the name of capitalism to increase their markets, plunder the resources, and exploit the workers of other countries. The effects of imperialism were devastating in the colonial possessions of the great powers. Lenin believed imperialism was the main cause of World War I. Old empires clashed with new ones, like Germany, driven by capitalist competition. For him, the Russian Revolution happened because the Russian workers were exploited more than those in the West, which kept their workers' class relatively satisfied, in turn exploiting the workers from their imperial possessions. Fast forward to post-World War II, and the era of colonialism was starting to unravel with new nation-states forming after a long era of economic and social dominance. Most of the new countries were trying to play and compete in the global economic system, but by the 1960s and 1970s, it was evident that the global South was staying underdeveloped. This situation sparked researchers to develop Dependency Theory, which argued that the international system itself is exploitative and inhibits development. In Dependency Theory, the world is divided into two groups of countries. The first group is the powerful core countries. Think USA, UK, France, and the weak periphery countries. The central idea here is that the core benefits from the global division of labor and dominates through industrial and technological superiority, while peripheral countries are relegated to resource extraction and cheap labor. This idea challenges the notion that all countries can just specialize and succeed. Dependency theory criticized classical liberalism by highlighting how specialization in primary goods increases dependence and inequality between countries. Most notably, the Prebisch-Singer hypothesis, which argues that the price of primary commodities declines relative to the price of manufactured goods over the long term, which puts primary product-based economies at a huge trade disadvantage over time. Additionally, within each country exists a stark class distinction between a small, wealthy elite and a large, impoverished working class. These elites across countries collaborate to maintain their power and wealth, reinforcing the status quo. Ultimately, the global capitalist system, driven by liberal economic theories and dominated by multinational corporations, continues to deepen these inequalities. Building on dependency theory, Emanuel Wallerstein developed the world system analysis, or world system theory, which provided a framework for understanding global economic inequalities. Unlike dependency theory, which focuses on country exploitation, world system analysis was focused on the system capital accumulation and production processes. The main thesis is that the system prioritizes the endless accumulation of capital regardless of nation-states. For Wallerstein, today's globalization is a byproduct of the spread and development of capitalism over the past 500 years. Wallerstein introduced a three-tier system with core, semi-periphery, and periphery countries. Core countries dominate through monopolized production processes, while peripheral countries engage in competitive, less profitable production. Semi-peripheral countries have a mix of both and strive to advance to core status while avoiding slipping into the periphery. Think of China, India, and Brazil. The semi-periphery are moderately developed nations that act as a stabilizing factor in the system, trading raw materials from the periphery and selling intermediate goods to the core. Wallerstein argued that development and progress do occur, but only for a small number of semi-peripheral states, and not for those peripheral states that remain providers of natural resources and raw materials to the developed industrial core. As you probably noticed, technology is a key factor that determines the country's status and its strength. The difference in countries' strength is crucial to maintaining the system as a whole, with strong states extracting the surplus to the core zone in what Wallerstein called unequal exchange. In more recent years, theories connected with world system analysis, like ecologically unequal exchange, have emerged to explain how capitalism's global consumption and capital accumulation disproportionately harm the environment in the global South. Have you asked yourself who pays the real price of your iPhone, EV car, fast fashion clothes, or how do the interconnected supply chains work to create such advanced products? Here is an example. Your clothes, electronics, and latest iPhone model are created from resources extracted from poorer countries, overproduced and assembled with cheap to medium-cost labor in countries like China and India, shipped and consumed in the West, And then the consumer waste is exported back again to the periphery. Ecologically unequal exchange claims that resources, energy, and materials are extracted from the global south to the developed core with detrimental effects to the environment. The core countries' practices of overproduction and overconsumption create enormous amounts of waste, which is imported back again by the periphery, serving as a sacrifice zone. The price of consumer goods in the global north is paid not only in dollars but in environmental degradation in the global south. Marx's idea that the labor class will eventually rise up and end the exploitation system around the world did not happen, especially in the Western capitalist countries. The reason for this was identified in Antonio Gramsci's concept of cultural hegemony. According to Gramsci, the ruling class maintains power and domination by coercion and, crucially, by consent. By using the full power of institutions, education, media, the military, and culture. The ruling class influences and persuades the working class to accept their ideas as common sense and in their best interest. Gramsci notes that the coercive element was extremely pervasive in Russia, while civil society was underdeveloped, which made it easy for the Bolshevik revolutionaries to overthrow and reconstruct the civil society. But in the West, however, there is a stronger relationship between political and civil society, limiting all revolutionary efforts. We can see this relationship play out in the creation of the welfare state, combined with high productivity in the West to reduce the revolutionary potential and influence of communism after World War II. A much closer example of cultural hegemony will be the modern U.S. two-party political system. Besides some differences on social issues like abortion and gay marriage, both parties ultimately embrace capitalist corporatist interests in that they both serve as facilitators for the dominant classes. This concept of internal hegemony was expanded to international relations by Robert Cox and other neo-Gramscian scholars, who argued that dominant powers shape the international system to favor their interests through institutions, ideas, and material capabilities. We can see this hegemony today in the almost unanimous acceptance and support for neoliberal economic policies in developing countries, often against their best interests. Institutions such as the World Bank, IMF, and WTO play a crucial role in establishing international rules and intellectual leadership consistent with the neoliberal order. The 20th century attempts at communism failed or deviated significantly from Marx's ideas, suggesting the concept may be unworkable. No country has ever achieved Marx's dream of a society without competition, money, or private property. And then there's Stalin. His brutal regime severely damaged Marxism's credibility. The first critique of Marxism is its normative nature and ideological bias focused on the downfall of capitalism. This is seen by realists as politically motivated and not objective or neutral. Second is the economic determinism and focus on class struggle as the single determinant in international relations. Neglecting and failing to explain nationalism, ethnic conflicts, culture, identity, and other global issues not directly tied with economic conditions. And third is that Marxism underestimates the role of the state as an independent actor. The structural determinism and analysis of global capitalism relegate states to second place without any agency or power. Due to its troubled past and horrors of authoritarian communist regimes, Marxism today and its IR viewpoints are marginalized and often seen as archaic. Currently, capitalism is the global economic ideology and often distorts the reasons for global inequalities. But persisting and growing terms like Global South and underdeveloped countries clearly make Marxism relevant now more than ever. Marxists and neo-Marxists will argue that historical imperialism, colonialism, cultural dominance, and dependency of poor countries towards the rich capitalist countries are not a thing of the past, but a structural and core feature of global capitalism that remains to this day. Marx's analysis of capitalism remains relevant. While his proposed solutions may not be fully applicable, his critiques help diagnose ongoing economic and social issues. As Marx himself asserted, the goal is not just to interpret the world, but to change it.